Hello, my name is Kristen Stecker, and this presentation will cover the New York City East River Tidal Energy Project for the Hydrokinetic Turbine Systems course at Georgia Institute of Technology. For many centuries, the East River has played an important role in the commercial development of the Port of New York. The East River is an essential navigable waterway, and historically, it was the center of maritime activities in New York City. The river was formed approximately 11,000 years ago during the most recent glacial period of North America. The river has played a significant role in the history of New York as it was a crucial waterway for trade and transportation during the early development of the city. The East River became a vital water passageway separating Manhattan and the Bronx from Brooklyn and Queens. New York City's East River is a 16-mile-long river and ranges from 600 to 4,000 feet wide. The river runs between Manhattan and Queens, connecting two parts of the Atlantic Ocean. The Upper New York Harbor connects on the south end of the East River, where the East River and the Hudson River collide, and the Long Island Sound connects towards the north end of the East River. Since the water that flows through the East River mainly consists of salt water, it is technically not a river, but a tidal estuary or tidal strait. Gravitational forces from the Earth, Moon, and Sun create a regular pattern of tides that flow in and out of New York City's East River. Water flows from the Upper New York Bay into the East River as the tide rises, creating an incoming or flood tide. As the tide falls, water flows out of the East River towards the Long Island Sound, creating an outgoing or ebb tide. Since the East River reverses its flow between ebb and flood tides, there are only about 15 minutes of still water between the tides. The East River frequently changes its direction of flow and is susceptible to strong fluctuations in its current, which are emphasized by the river's narrowness and depth varieties. The tidal currents in the East River are mainly driven by the pressure head differences between the New York Harbor Inlet and the Long Island Sound outlet. The underwater topography and specific formations in the East River play a significant role in intensifying the tidal currents. The regularity and predictability of these tidal currents is a desirable feature for hydrokinetic energy, as it allows for accurate forecasting of the electricity supply. For this project, the site locates in New York City's East River on the west side of Roosevelt Island. The river typically experiences two high tides and two low tides each day, otherwise known as a semidiurnal tide cycle. The tidal range is the difference in water levels between high tide and low tide. The tidal range of New York City's East River varies, but is typically around 4 to 5 feet. The project site is located in the East River on the west side of Roosevelt Island, where the water depths range from 17 meters to 32 meters. The average water current speeds in the East River off of Roosevelt Island range from 1.4 meters per second to approximately 2.5 meters per second. The tidal speed distribution is the variation in water current speeds per day. The water velocity variation per day in the East River and the frequency of these occurrences is shown in the graph on the screen. The purpose of this project was to design a horizontal axis marine turbine that can operate in New York City's East River while providing sufficient power to the residents on Roosevelt Island. Roosevelt Island is a 1.5-mile long and 1/8 mile wide island that is part of the borough of Manhattan. The island has an average population of 11,722 and a total area of 147 acres. We will now go through some of the history with Roosevelt Island. So before European colonization, the island was inhabited by the Native Americans. I also think this picture on the left side of the screen is quite interesting, as it is pretty difficult to imagine what New York City would have looked like prior to its development. In the 17th century, the island was purchased by the Blackwell family to be used for farming. The island was then renamed as Blackwell's Island. Later in the 19th and early 20th century, the island was famous for housing various institutions, including hospitals, asylums, and correctional facilities. In 1971, the island was renamed Roosevelt Island in honor of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. This was all part of a larger plan to revitalize the island and to improve its image. The plan was to start distancing the island from its earlier associations with institutions like prisons and asylums. The plan included provisions for housing, parks, transportation, and infrastructure. One of the primary goals of the revitalization plan was to create a mixed-income residential community on the island by constructing new apartment buildings and renovating existing structures to accommodate a diverse population. Overall, the revitalization plan aimed to create a more livable and sustainable community for its residents. Roosevelt Island's history is considered a place of care and rehabilitation, which is reflected in the architecturally significant landmarks still located on Roosevelt Island today. Roosevelt Island today contains a mixture of residential, commercial, institutional, and greenery spaces, and it is home to a diverse community of residents, including families, students, and professionals. The island is accessible via the F-Train subway, the Roosevelt Island Tramway, the Roosevelt Island Bridge, ferries, or pedestrian pathways for walking and biking. Con Edison is the current and dominant electric utility company that provides power to all 5 boroughs in New York City. Only about half of New York City's electricity is provided from outside of the city, and the remaining must be provided within the 5 boroughs. New York City currently relies on 24 in-city power plants that run on natural gas or fuel oil, with the majority of them having been built over 40 to 50 years ago. Since the average Manhattan resident uses about 600 kilowatt hours of electricity per month, and the average population on Roosevelt Island is 11,722, the average monthly electricity usage on Roosevelt Island was assumed to be around 7,000 megawatt hours per month. Con Edison's average monthly electricity rate for a New York City resident was determined to be 29.53 cents per kilowatt hour in 2021, currently 33.57 cents per kilowatt hour in 2024, and it is projected to be 34.17 cents per kilowatt hour in 2025. The goal for these projects was to design a horizontal axis turbine capable of generating 100 to 200 kilowatts of power in the East River tidal strait. Verdant Power is a marine renewable energy company that developed the first tidal energy project in the United States off of Roosevelt Island in New York City's East River. The Roosevelt Island Tidal Energy Project, or the Wright Project, was implemented in multiple phases, each of which involved the deployment of additional turbines and infrastructure, which allowed for incremental testing and optimization of the tidal energy system. The project conducted multiple assessments to study the tidal currents and to measure water levels, current speeds, tidal patterns, and the effects on the environment. The results from these tests were very helpful when designing the turbine system for this course. In their final phase, Verdant developed an improved version of the turbines to be used at the project site, which are shown in the pictures on the screen. The turbines were the 5th generation free flow kinetic hydropower system, or Gen 5 FFFS, which were designed with the goal of extending service life, minimizing on-water maintenance work, and to reduce assembly and maintenance costs. The turbines had a rotor diameter of 16.4 feet, with 3 blades rotating at approximately 40 RPM. Verdant's turbines were also capable of switching direction with the current, rotating so that they can generate maximum power no matter which direction the river is flowing. The Verdant tri-frame mounting system is a single triangular frame mount that supports 3 turbines at once onto the riverbed and requires no civil works on the riverbed. The mount was designed to simplify the deployment and retrieval process during installation and maintenance, which allowed for the reduction in timeline and costs. The Wright project operated for 9 months, and as of December 2021, Verdant Power's Wright project was no longer in operation, as the project license expired and the system was decommissioned and all infrastructure was removed. The goal for this course focused on the optimization of the previous Wright project. The Wright project and its tidal energy system were considered as the starting point for this overall course project and was an extremely beneficial reference for this course. The turbine design for this course had a rotor diameter of 8.4 meters and with a blade cross-section utilizing the NACA 4415 airfoil. The dual rotor turbine utilized a 2-bladed rotor and was designed for a rated velocity of 2.5 meters per second and a rated power of 2 megawatts. The turbines would be installed on the west side of Roosevelt Island in the East River, with a minimum river depth of 17 meters and a hub height of 6 meters. Plots of chord and twist versus radial location are shown on the right side of the screen. This slide shows a plot of power generated by the design turbine versus water velocity in the East River on the left side of the screen, and a plot of a coefficient of power for the design turbine versus tip speed ratios on the right side of the screen. Here, this plot shows the power output for the design turbine, taking into account the water velocity variation per day in New York City's East River. The rated capacity for one turbine was 2 megawatts, with an annual power output of 387 megawatt hours per year, equivalent to powering 53 residents on Roosevelt Island. A hydrokinetic turbine farm utilizing 10 of the design turbines for a total rated capacity of 20 megawatts had an annual power output of 3,874 megawatt hours per year, equivalent to powering 538 residents on Roosevelt Island. For reference, Verdant Power's tri-frame and 3 of their Gen 5 FFS turbines were installed in New York City's East River. The system had a total rated capacity of 210 kilowatts, or 70 kilowatts per turbine. The system was installed in the East River for approximately 9 months and was capable of generating 312 megawatt hours of electricity. As discussed in the previous slide, a hydrokinetic turbine farm utilizing 10 of the designed turbines produced an annual power output of 3,874 megawatt hours per year, equivalent to powering 538 residents on Roosevelt Island. The design turbine system will aim to provide power to the Octagon, which is an apartment building on Roosevelt Island. The building was originally the New York City Mental Health Asylum back when the island was known as Blackwell's Island. Later, the building was incorporated into the Metropolitan Hospital, which was then closed and abandoned in 1955. The building was restored and renovated in 2006 as a lobby entrance for 2 adjacent apartment buildings on Roosevelt Island, now known as the Octagon. The Octagon has 500 units, which houses approximately 735 people. The design turbine farm would be capable of powering 73% of the residents in this apartment building, but since the building already has solar panels that are used to power a portion of the building, the design turbine farm could complete the power requirements for the Octagon apartment building. Overall, New York City's East River is a viable location for a tidal energy project, as proved by the results of this project and the Verdant Power Roosevelt Island Tidal Energy Project. Although there are still several disadvantages with tidal power production that need to be addressed before tidal energy can reach its full potential. The largest barrier to tidal energy is the high costs associated with constructing tidal power stations, including the costs of installing and maintaining the turbines and other infrastructure, and the high capital costs. The mounting system for the hydrokinetic turbines utilized the Verdant tri-frame mount, which is capable of installing and retrieving 3 turbines and their mounting systems simultaneously. This helped to drastically decrease the costs associated with the entire turbine system. The system capital expenditure and the system operating expenses for operating 1 and 10 turbines is shown in the table on the screen. The system capital expenditure for 1 turbine was 693.6 cents per kilowatt hour in 2024 US dollars. The system capital expenditure for 10 turbines was 161.7 cents per kilowatt hour. System operating expenses for 1 turbine was 486.4 cents per kilowatt hour, and for 10 turbines, it was 96.8 cents per kilowatt hour. The levelized cost of energy was determined to be 1,180 cents per kilowatt hour when designing for 1 turbine, and 259 cents per kilowatt hour when designing for a hydrokinetic turbine farm utilizing 10 of these designed turbines. Compared to Con Edison's standard electricity rate in Manhattan, which was 33.57 cents per kilowatt hour as of February 2024, the designed hydrokinetic turbine farm would increase the standard cost of energy for a typical Manhattan resident. When designing a tidal energy project, it is important to study the public policy issues, including costs and environmental effects of installing and operating tidal power systems, environmental concerns, and zoning requirements. One of the main concerns with tidal energy is the potential negative effects it can have on marine life. Construction activities may disturb marine ecosystems, and the noise generated by turbines creates a cause for concern, as this may negatively impact marine life, including fish and other marine mammals. A major concern raised by environmentalists in response to tidal power is the effect on aquatic animals and plants. As turbines spin, it is a concern for fish and other sea life, as they could swim into the blades, which may potentially lead to serious injury or death. Since tidal power involves installing hydropower turbines underwater, there could also be issues with corrosion or biofueling, so it is important to carefully select the project site and the materials used. The following slide covers agencies involved with the regulatory guidelines for hydrokinetic turbine systems in the United States. The FERC is the primary federal agency responsible for regulating the licensing of hydrokinetic projects in navigable waters under the Federal Power Act. FERC issues licenses for the construction, operation, and maintenance of hydrokinetic projects through its integrated licensing process or alternative licensing process. Applicants must comply with the FERC's regulations, including environmental requirements under the National Environmental Policy Act, in consultation with other federal and state agencies, tribes, and stakeholders. The Army Corps of Engineers regulates activities in navigable waters and issues permits under Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act and Section 404 of the Clean Water Act for structures, dredging, and fill activities associated with hydrokinetic projects. USACE evaluates permit applications to ensure compliance with environmental laws and regulations, including impacts on water quality, aquatic habits, and navigation. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's National Marine Fisheries Service and Office of National Marine Sanctuaries provide guidance on the potential impacts of hydrokinetic projects on marine species and habitats. They may issue permits under the Marine Mammal Protection Act and Endangered Species Act for activities that may affect protected species. The Environmental Protection Agency provides regulatory oversight of water quality standards and pollution control under the Clean Water Act, ensuring that hydrokinetic projects do not degrade water quality or harm aquatic ecosystems. States may have their own regulatory requirements for hydrokinetic projects, including permits for water use, environmental impact assessments, and coastal zone management. Local authorities may have jurisdiction over zoning, land use, or permitting for onshore infrastructure associated with hydrokinetic projects. Additionally, federal agencies are required to consult with Native American tribes that may be affected by hydrokinetic projects, respecting tribal sovereignty and cultural resources. This slide covers agencies involved with the regulatory guidelines for hydrokinetic turbine systems in New York State. The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation regulates activities in New York's water bodies, including tidal and freshwater areas, under the state's environmental conservation law. Developers may need permits for activities such as construction, operation, and maintenance that may impact water quality, aquatic habitats, and wildlife. They evaluate permit applications and ensure compliance with the state environmental regulations, including the State Environmental Quality Review Act for Environmental Impact Assessment. The New York State Energy Research and Development Authority plays a role in promoting renewable energy development in New York, including hydrokinetic energy. They may provide funding, technical assistance, and support for research, development, and demonstration projects related to hydrokinetic turbine systems. The New York State Department of State oversees coastal management and issues permits for activities within New York State's Coastal Zone Management Program. Developers of hydrokinetic projects in coastal areas may need permits from NYSDOS to ensure compliance with coastal zone policies and regulations. Local governments, such as city or county authorities, may have jurisdiction over zoning, land use, and permitting for onshore infrastructure associated with hydrokinetic projects. Developers may need to obtain permits or approvals from local authorities for activities such as site development, construction, and access to waterfront areas. The New York State Public Service Commission regulates utilities and energy infrastructure in New York, including aspects of renewable energy development and interconnection standards. Developers of hydrokinetic projects may need to comply with PSC regulations related to grid interconnection, power purchase agreements, and other utility requirements. Federal agencies such as the FERC and the USACE also have regulatory jurisdiction over hydrokinetic projects in New York State's navigable waters, as outlined in the previous slide. The East River is home to a variety of aquatic life and also serves as a route for migrating aquatic species, including winter flounder, Atlantic tomcod, striped bass, bay anchovy, the American eel, the Atlantic silverside, the northern pipefish, and many more. Two federally listed endangered fish species that are known to travel the river area include the short-nosed sturgeon and the Atlantic sturgeon. There is also a possibility for endangered and threatened turtles to be present in the area. A variety of birds also inhabit the area, with some utilizing the river for feeding and resting. As part of its first ever FERC pilot license approval process, Verdant Power passed a rigorous environmental impact assessment process. Through this, including the approval from over 20 renewable resource agencies and environmental groups, Verdant Power demonstrated that the rotation of their turbine blades did not affect fish, birds, or animals that swim in New York City's East River. Observations concluded that the majority of the aquatic fauna avoided the tidal power turbines during their assessment process. Since 2006, Verdant Power has been analyzing the effects of installing a tidal powered turbine system in New York City's East River. The biological assessment for the Wright project rated the probability for interaction with these endangered fish and turtles to be relatively low. During their Phase 2 trial period, Verdant proved that their tidal turbines do not injure fish. Analysts did not observe a single instance of fish or other species being struck by a turbine blade. This is due to the fact that the turbine blades move rather slowly enough for fish to swim through them, though through the trial period showed that fish generally avoided the turbines altogether. The baseline assessment and post-installation monitoring for the Wright project demonstrated that the underwater ambient and turbine noise would not cause behavioral reactions or injury to marine life. Additionally, pre- and post-deployment studies at the Wright project found that noise generated by the turbines will likely be audible to the fish in the East River, but would not cause them any injury. Water quality sampling and testing was also conducted and resulted in no sediment being observed in the East River. Analysts also confirmed that the blades do not pose as a threat to birds or other wildlife in or around New York City's East River. Additionally, it is very rare to find a human swimming near this location of the East River, but the turbines are installed deep enough in the water that it would be extremely difficult for the average person to reach it in the first place. At the end of its operational life, a tidal energy system will be decommissioned. Decommissioning the device's cables is considered to have a greater effect as it would involve removal of structure that could have been used by resident fishes for habitats. Potential environmental effects from decommissioning a tidal energy device includes increased noise, habitat disturbance, sediment disturbance, chemical contamination, marine debris, temporary turbulence, and surface traffic. The negative effects that have come with decommissioning a tidal energy device were vastly reduced with the use of the tri-frame mount, as 3 turbines are connected through the mount, all of which could be removed from the site simultaneously. The purpose of this course was to design a hydrokinetic turbine system in New York City's East River with the goal of providing power to the residents on Roosevelt Island. The designed 2-bladed dual rotor turbine had a rotor radius of 4.2 meters and operated at a rotor rotational rate of approximately 40 RPM. The turbine had a generator-rated capacity of 2 megawatts and was able to produce 387 megawatts of power per year. For a rotor to be capable of generating this much power, it must operate at a high rotational rate, which can potentially cause cavitation. Rotors that rotate at excessively high rotational rates have the ability to cause water to form vapor bubbles that may implode. This is known as cavitation. Cavitation occurs in locations at which the local pressure over the airfoil is less than the vapor pressure. Cavitation occurred at all water velocities for the designed turbine, with the exception of 2.15 meters per second. Cavitation also consistently occurred at a radial location of 0.976 meters for the designed turbine. Cavitation needs to be avoided in hydrokinetic turbine applications as it causes performance deterioration on turbines, as well as mechanical damage, noise and vibration, all of which are ultimately lead to turbine failure. Rotors operating at higher rotational rates are capable of generating more power, but in return, they have a higher chance of experiencing cavitation. Further improvements could be made to the design of this turbine with efforts towards reducing the rotor rotational rate to limit the likeliness of cavitation effects while maintaining or improving the generated power output. Investigations could also be done on relocating this project to the Hell's Gate in East River. Hell's Gate is named after the strong tidal currents and dangerously turbulent and rocky section of the East River that it bridges. The Hell's Gate Bridge is located at the north end of the East River between Astoria, Queens, and Randall's Island. This section of the river experiences accelerated flows during tidal changes, which creates turbulent and fast-moving currents. When combined with the underwater geography, making it a potentially superior location for operating a tidal energy device. The water currents near Hell's Gate are found to frequently reach a speed of 2.6 meters per second multiple times a day, which is higher and occurs more frequently than the maximum water current speeds found in the East River, also for Roosevelt Island. Overall, New York City's East River was proved to be a viable location for tidal energy project, with 10 of the designed turbines being capable of providing power to all of the residents at the Octagon apartment building on Roosevelt Island.